It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. Like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a wide variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts from. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Today, we are continuing our popular supply chain real estate series brought to you by none other than our supplychainrealestate.com partners. Got a great show lined up today and looking forward to diving into the conversation. Let's welcome, before we get to the red meat of what we're going to talk about here today, let's welcome in my fearless co-host, Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, trusted advisor to many, esteemed guru to some. Greg, good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing fantastic.
Seems too few people ask you how you're doing.
We had a big AAA breakfast, unlike you, which we're going to take care of in a couple hours.
Good.
And we needed that because we're going to be walking through some
heavy topics
with two industry heavyweights.
Yeah, it's like old home week because at Blue Ridge, when I was running that company, we had a ton of people in the food and food service industry. So it's interesting to talk to anyone who knows anything about that. That's kind of a behind-the-scenes industry.
Little behind the scenes is good.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes is good. We're going to get behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, and all around here today on the Supply Chain Real Estate Series. Going to get seen, that's right. Let's welcome in our featured guest before we talk about some of the top developments in the industry. I want to welcome in Ward Richmond, Executive Vice President and Shareholder at Colliers International. Ward, how you doing?
Great. It's good to be back in Atlanta.
Absolutely. You're staying on a plane these days, aren't you?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I'm about ready for it to slow down a little bit for the holidays. So I think I have 3 more trips between now and Thanksgiving, and then a pretty slow December of travel. So that'll be nice.
Okay, good deal. Well, glad to have you back in the ATL and look forward to picking your brain here today. Chris Cummings, National Director of Food Advisory Services with Colliers International, is your cohort today. Chris, how you doing?
I'm well. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Enjoyed the warm-up conversation and looking forward to hearing your insights and perspective on cold chain and food supply chain today. But before we get there, Greg, coming in hot and heavy from the Supply Chain Now Radio Industry Analysis Office, what are some of the top things to know in Supply Chain Now?
Yeah, so just a couple things here this morning. I want to save the best for last because that'll lead us right into the conversation with Chris and Ward.
Yep.
But get this. So our friends at Black & Decker have actually found the upside to tariffs. So they're saying that they're in a position because of the way that they source their goods to take advantage because they don't source their goods the way that many other companies do. So that's an interesting purview. I posted on it about it on LinkedIn, and it's gotten some interest on there. Everybody has an opinion on trade and tariffs, and our favorite guest co-host, Will Haraway, is a big tariffs fan. So this is in honor of him mentioning some tariffs, but it is interesting that there are companies that are actually making hay during this time.
Well, so. and let's just he's a big fan of tariff reporting.
Yes.
Talking
about tariffs. Right. Yeah, less of a fan of tariffs.
I feel like we can't avoid talking about tariffs. I never imagined when I was growing up that I'd be talking about tariffs on podcasts, but here we are. So what do? Do they explain like high level? Were they already doing having a business plan that was not impacted, or did they modify their business plan?
Alternate business plan. So they already source from 2 different regions of the country, and so they've just moved their sourcing, and this is a tactic that many other companies are undertaking, is to move their sourcing to the non-tariffed portion of the world, so that they can avoid those.
So it is an active shift in strategy based upon the trade dispute.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. It's specific to the list 4 tariffs. I don't know the details of list 4, but essentially they've got a way around it. So
teams of attorneys.
Yes. Yes, I'm sure that's right.
That's the way around it.
And teams of supply chain pros. And this is something that everyone will be interested in, and also one of Will Haraway's favorite topics. So some new data out on the cannabis industry. So the cannabis industry is $9.8 billion legal right now, and it's expected to grow to $30 billion in 2024. It's growing at about 20% a year.
Like a weed.
You never. It is smoking. Yeah. And what's interesting about this, so this is another topic that I have rendered my opinion on. I can't help myself. There was a big cannabis industry show in Chicago in the past weekend, and one of the topics was actually the Blues Brothers, because the Bluesmobile was actually at the conference. So people were making all these industry references to that. And, one of the issues that remains with this industry is that the taxes and the regulation is so incredibly onerous that people are motivated to stay in the illicit industry. In fact, in California, there are 3 times as many illicit dispensaries as legal dispensaries. So people with false licenses and with a faux dispensary just essentially dealing drugs right there. So it's an interesting, and some companies I understand are kind of straddling the legality line, if you will. So it's a lesson we should have learned during Prohibition. It's a lesson that Scotland still, or an issue that Scotland still has, where Scotch is like 5 times more costly in Scotland than it is in the U.S. So
interesting.
My argument is that the states need to be a little bit more realistic about the regulation that they're trying to put in place to confront illicit distribution. Because now it seems like the regulations and the costs are so onerous that it's actually motivating illicit distribution. That's an issue. And if we want the legal market to thrive, then we have to really subjugate the illicit market.
It'll be interesting to see, here, given that this is our supply chain real estate podcast series with Ward Richmond, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out as these cannabis companies and as regulation loosens up a little bit and you see it proliferate, how that plays out and adds demand to
it's huge already in real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge in real estate already. A lot of industrial properties are being converted to indoor grow facilities.
It is. I've sold facilities for cannabis use that used to be last mile facilities. Those are really great locations for them. So that was in Denver. It was a 20,000 foot freestanding building. It's a small fenced in truck court, secure freestanding building. And they were... the last mile company I represented was leasing it for $3 a foot. So just saying on a 10 cap, that would be $30 a foot in value. We sold the building for close to $100 a foot. So that's like 3x the amount of what it was worth when it was being used as last mile to converting it to cannabis use.
So tip of the iceberg, especially as it's able to...
I have a friend of mine that used to, he was at Colliers, high up at Colliers, and he is now in the cannabis facility development industry. And we've been talking about land plays in markets like Dallas where cannabis is still not legal, just to be prepared for when it eventually becomes legal. We'll be discussing that live at 4:20 today.
Okay.
Oh, very good.
No shortage of jokes on this topic, but
but I mean, look, the legal market, particularly for medicinal, is going to cross all 50 state lines eventually. It's already in over 40 states, and
really,
okay. And this industry, I mean, to give you an idea of the potential scale here, the industry, CBD, which is non-THC cannabis, and all of the other products, hemp and whatnot, they're poised to disrupt a $2.6 trillion consumer industry. That's trillion with a T.
Oh, yeah.
That includes
it's everywhere.
Energy drinks and dog treats and, and skin lotions and things like that. So this is a serious contender.
Huge opportunity.
It's something you got to keep your eye on.
Yep.
Right.
Anything else from Malcolm and the...
Yes, this is just small news, and like I said, a great segue into our supply chain real estate. Prologis just announced Sunday that it will acquire Liberty Property Trust, all stock transaction valued at $12.6 billion.
Wow!
So they'll close in the first quarter of 2020. It's 107 million square feet of logistics space. And 5.1 million square feet in development. So I don't even know what to say about that. So I'm going to leave that to you guys.
So keep getting bigger.
Yeah. So, and I've been trying to get one of my good friends that's pretty high up at Prologis to come on the podcast. So I'll have to forward him this episode and say, hey, Mike Curlis, I'm talking to you, buddy, and we want to get you on the podcast with us to tell us what's going on with Prologis.
Yeah.
And it's really funny. Midway through 2019, there were all these reports that came out. Oh, industrial sales have fallen off in 2019. And then the second half of the year, Blackstone acquired GLP for $18 billion. So think about that. And then Prologis now acquiring Liberty for $12 billion. Blackstone also bought Colony for $6 billion, I think. And then spun off another portfolio to another group, I think around $5 billion. So all of a sudden, the second half of the year has got to be the most explosive 6 months in industrial sales volume in the history of time.
So
I would think.
But their company, their portfolio platform trades.
That's
which
right.
is a little unique.
That's true. Yeah, and especially so much velocity in such a short period of time with these huge players just consolidating it all. So then it's a big bet on e-commerce at the end of the day.
100%.
A couple things driving it, right? The demand for warehousing space is really high for shippers, right? Everybody seems to be getting into the e-commerce or direct-to-consumer space, and land in desirable markets is relatively short in supply. So, people are poaching the products that already exist, the properties that already exist, and they're trying to find desirable places to put properties as well.
Yeah, and more urban places, right? To put some of these distribution and fulfillment
That's
centers.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good stuff. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to hear some of the top things to know in supply chain now. And with that said, we are going to dive deep into our featured guests here. And we want to start, before we talk shop, we want to give our listeners a chance to get to know both of y'all a little better. Ward, you're a repeat Hollywood hero here on the show. So folks have gotten a sense of you. We really enjoyed having you here in Atlanta. So just refresh our listeners' memory of who you are, though. In a nutshell, tell us a little about your background and what you do.
Great. It's fantastic to be back in Atlanta, Supply Chain City, as we like to call it here. It's Supply Chain
I love that.
Now Radio.
I like
Chambers
that.
going to love that.
That's right. My name's Ward Richmond, and I'm born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and I've been focusing in the supply chain real estate sector for the last 13 years, and I work with a team. We're based in our Dallas office, and we specialize in representing occupiers of supply chain real estate. And by that, I mean distribution facilities, manufacturing facilities, trucking facilities. Those are our three really core areas of expertise in terms of facility types. So a lot of our customers are third-party logistics companies or trucking companies. And then we also work with a handful of shippers from manufacturers in the cold chain, like Marine Harvest, now Moe, and they're a salmon manufacturer. We work with paper manufacturers and then other shippers like retailers and carpet distributors. So
awesome.
All these people are in the market hunting for industrial real estate, and we're working throughout North America. So U.S., Canada, Mexico, that's the main region where we're focused, and typically representing occupiers with fairly large facility footprints, multiple facilities in multiple markets across the country or the continent. And that's what we do.
Coast to coast.
Yeah.
And we've gotten a sense of working with you and your team, and you got the A team. I love the video that y'all published. I guess it's been a little over a month now, maybe.
Yeah, about a month ago.
I think it helps visualize what you do, and it helps visualize members of your team. And I think in y'all's business, there might be a lot of misconceptions about what y'all do. And so
Definitely.
video, I mean, that was such a neat, I bet it was a neat project to put together.
It was pretty fun to do. And we wanted to tell our story. We have a daily sales meeting. I think I've talked about the fact that we do that. And one of the items we discuss every day is a reminder of what do we do. It's really important. Everyone on the team is clear on what we do. And funny enough, lots of our actual competitors don't really know what we do because it's such a niche value proposition, I think, in terms of working with these multi-market supply chain companies throughout North America. It's not the traditional way of attacking commercial real estate, which is the typical approach that I'd say the bulk of the industry does, is you focus locally. And,
right.
And it's always going to be a local business, but we found that we can create massive value by marrying a partnership between the local market experts and then macro vertical experts. And that's digging into what we're talking about today.
Definitely. And, I think the word local has changed and evolved quite a bit in this global business community, especially as you're next door to your neighbors in Brazil in ways that never was, before it never took place. So, but fascinating y'all's approach and the team, and love the video. All right, so Chris Cummings, you're the first time on the show, so welcome to Supply Chain Radio, National Director of Food Advisory Services with Colliers International. So let's get to know you a little better. So for starters, where are you from?
I'm from here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up near Chastain Park.
Okay, man, you get a native badge.
Family lives over in Virginia Highlands. So.
Wow.
Okay. So
That's a lifer.
it is a lifer.
Unique.
And you've been, to be dealing with the traffic for all 27 of your years.
Well, I got a mile, like where I picked up a word this morning at the W, I've got a mile. I can walk to work through Piedmont Park in 1.5 miles, so it's not. So the commute's
jealous.
pretty easy.
By the way, you need to go to Dallas because Dallas traffic trumps Atlanta. I'm sorry. I keep hearing about Atlanta traffic.
Come on.
I hear about LA traffic. I'm like, come to Dallas at 8:30 on a Tuesday. You're going to want to jump off the bridge.
Oh, God. All right. So, but prior to Colliers, what did you do in industry?
I've been at Colliers for about 15, 16 years. Prior to that, I actually sold software for corporate services. So if a Colliers or Trammell Crow or someone was going in to pitch a big account, we did lease administration, transaction management, and then decided that 16, 17 years ago that the brokerage route would be better for me, specifically industrial. Did that for 7 or 8 years, and then through a mentor realized that I kind of needed a differentiator from all the other guys and gals out there, and started specializing in food. So that took place about 8 years ago, and since then I've built a small team around us, and we work on, we're probably working on 25 or 30 projects across the U.S. Those can be with manufacturers, 3PLs, retailers, and we work with anything from a classic tenant rep like Ward and his team do to corporate dispositions, which I would consider a manufacturing, a distribution facility that they no longer use, that they need to dispose of. And lastly, there's been a lot of institutional capital since Amazon acquired Whole Foods. Institutional capital used to not be interested in cold at all, just because there was the high dollar per square foot, the unknown about the systems, and now all of a sudden it's because infrastructure funds are looking at the cold supply chain.
Right.
It is now a place for institutional capital to put money. So we worked with Blackstone last year doing about a $250, $300 million acquisition. So again, all in the food supply chain and different aspects across the country.
And as leading it coast to coast, right? Food advisory services for the firm. Now let's kind of shift gears a little bit here, because I think many folks in supply chain get a sense and understand what cold chain refers to. But there's plenty of other folks that might be slow like myself that may not have heard or dealt in the cold chain industry. So let's define that first, what that means before we kind of dive into
Let's be clear. I was a history major at Georgia. I didn't go to Brown.
Come on.
So, this is full disclosure. All this information has been learned the hard way, rolling up the sleeves.
Full disclosure, they don't. When I was at Brown, they did not teach cold chain. So, FYI, Georgia Tech now they're teaching cold chain right here at Georgia Tech.
So we consider the supply chain, the cold supply chain, anything from manufacturers and processors that are actually doing, making the food, let's say, bringing it in from the fields to making the food, all the way to the 3PLs. And in the 3PL world, you can have food service guys, you can have C-store guys, convenience store guys, and then you can have 3PLs that work with bigger food manufacturers. And then the last component of that is the grocery. Some grocers outsource them, their supply chain to 3PLs. Some people run it inside. Some people, like Sprouts, do a combination. So it's any perishable good that is taken from the field to ultimately to where the consumer purchases it, and all the companies that kind of make up all those different aspects of the chain we work with.
Malcolm, who leads our research here at Supply Chain Now Radio, shot me a note earlier today. I don't know if it's true. I've learned not to doubt Malcolm, but he mentioned that when this freight is in transit, these different items, that they refer to it as cool cargo. Is that a term you've ever heard, or is Malcolm pulling my leg a little bit?
Yeah, no, cool cargo. I mean, the technology around here to keep these products at their optimum temperature, so that when you do get it on at a restaurant, or you get it on the shelf of a grocery store, listen, that the longevity of that product equals dollar. So if you don't keep the right temperature for the right product, then spoilage is going to occur, and that's to the detriment of all those that are involved.
These are some really intricate facilities too. I mean, so in a previous life, we offered technology to the food distribution, food service industry. Burris Logistics, I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Donnie Burris out of Maryland.
Yeah, they love to give me a tour of their facility, where they would give me the big heavy coat and then take me to into the cool room, cold room, the freezer, Sub-Zero. Yeah. Sub-Zero is where I opted out. I tried to spend less than 20 seconds in the Sub-Zero freezer. But I mean, they're massive facilities. They have to be hyper efficient. They have to be organized very well, right? I mean, the internal workings are as important as the external workings. And you have to be able to move cargo in relatively easily. Yeah. So you're.
By the way, working in these facilities, if you ever think about the labor side of this, I mentioned Moe earlier, the salmon distributor, and they've actually let us in their warehouse, and we suited up, put on gloves, and we're going through the deboning of a salmon fillet process on the machine. And I consider myself to be a pretty tough guy, but when I'm in there for 5 minutes messing with freezing cold salmon in a freezing cold warehouse, I mean, it is not easy, and it's a challenge. So I can only imagine the labor side of that, and finding people in these manufacturing facilities and distribution facilities go work in the cold all day.
I think the benefit for Burris is if you're in Maryland or Delaware, where their facilities are, if you work in a Sub-Zero freezer all day, Maryland feels warm when you walk outside.
There you go.
That's true. Well, if our listeners can't tell, we got a lot of passion around this subject here today. And I want to kind of shift gears because, Chris, I want to really pick your brain and leaders that are in this space, in this cold chain space, regardless of what sector. And you've mentioned 3 key sectors that maybe we're going to dive deeper on. But if you were building a list of some of the top things that they really needs to be on their radar, trends that are taking place, challenges that are taking place, other developments, what would that short list of items look like?
I mean, safety is obviously of the utmost importance, and you're going to continue to see, we've had food safety issues, and that can, that can shut a $100 million company down overnight, both how it got into the food and subsequently its tracking to the ultimate retailer. So I'd say that's across all kind of components of the supply chain. And, one that touches all of them that I think leaders are, cognizant of is just flexibility. you hear about flexible, agile supply chains, but you have to understand, I mean, the food industry is going through the biggest quantum shift that's probably gone on. I mean, it was the same for 60 years, you know. You look at 3G buying Kraft, and, you know, they thought they could do their zero-based budget accounting, cut a lot of overhead, but not continual innovate. And, you know, look what's happened to them. Because what's happening is the consumer is fleecing these old line companies that are not innovating. So their products that we ate as children are no longer being consumed. And so if you look at that from a manufacturer processor, all these guys and gals at the top talk about, you know, what the changing consumer has on their effect is flexibility. We've got to be able to run lines in and out. We can't run the same lines with the same product. You got to be able to switch these lines over as we bring on new consumers. And so that's created a significant growth in what we call co-packers. Or we all have a business, right? And we manufacture a bar, right? And so maybe we outsource that the production of that bar to someone that's got spare room on their line and then distribute it from there. So there's been a significant uptick in co-packers because they might have the flexibility. On the 3PL world, kind of on the second level, you know, there's continuing consolidation. I mean, there's just been massive consolidation. The cold storage business was traditionally run by mom and pops, you know, that got into it slowly and then grew it over time. And, you know, a lot of these companies have been around for a very long time, but there is infrastructure money coming into it. There's acquisitions. And so there's a big roll up, whether it's Americold, whether it's the Lineage Logistics, or whether it's the US Cold, they're acquiring a massive amount of facilities.
And there seems to be, I've read different reports, especially in the logistics tech space, but by extension, the logistics space, there seems to be a lot more outside money coming into the space from the PE groups and other firms like that than there have been in the previous decades. Would y'all agree with that? Is that what you're seeing?
It's a ton coming in. And 2017, 2018 were two of the highest years.
So we talked about manufacturing and the processors. We're talking now about a 3PL. Before we move on to retail, anything else about 3PL that you're seeing?
Well, I mean, it's... You know, listen, if you go into, we were talking about earlier, if you go into a grocery store today, there are probably 60 different types of frozen pizza you can get. So think about that net effect on a 3PLer that was used to running 20, 30,000 stock keeping units. And now all of a sudden they got to run 55 or 60,000 in a frozen environment. And let's be honest, you know, everybody thinks this is a sexy business and a business that they want to get into. We're not distributing iPhones. We're distributing food. It's a low margin business. Right. So as complexities continue to increase, you know, your margins decrease ultimately. So I would say that the Sku proliferation among the 3PL is a continual challenge in that area.
Okay, so layman's terms, when we talk about Sku proliferation, which is another cup of coffee just to say it, what do you mean for layman, for folks that may be new to the industry? What do you mean?
Meaning we used to carry 5 brands of ice cream, and now we carry 450 brands. So each one of those brands has a stock keeping unit of a specific type. And so you can imagine building a pallet that goes to a grocery store. Well, maybe you used to always put 100% Breyers on there, and now you got 50 different brands that you've got to build that pallet up to get it into the store.
And even within brands, you might have multiple flavors or orientations of the product.
I was thinking like Tombstone Pizza, since we were talking about frozen pizzas, and
not DiGiorno.
Or let's say DiGiorno. So there used to be DiGiorno, and then there's like DiGiorno Extreme, DiGiorno gluten-free, DiGiorno home batch delivery. Crust. Like there's cauliflower crust. Love that. That's great for the low carb diet. But all of this is all part of consumer demand and expectations and wanting to feel like you have a boutique product. And so there's lots of major companies like Kellogg's. I think I found out they're making this healthy cereal they sell at the store that you think is like some niche company that's selling you this really cool organic brand, and then you look at where it's being shipped from, and it's Kellogg's. You're like, whoa! They put some nice packaging on here to make me think that I'm buying this from a family in California that's like farm raising cereal.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I said earlier. It's like the craft beer business. I mean, you know, you can now. It is
20 years ago. You said that.
Right. Well, 20. Yeah. You know, you go. The food business is probably like the craft beer business was 10 or 15 years ago, and there's so many. The consumer's demanding for it, right? Yeah. They're actually finally speaking, and they're speaking through social media, and they're speaking through their buying patterns.
Yes.
And you know, it's interesting to then look at the M&A teams of like a Kellogg's. You know, they're like, you know, why are we looking at this $50 million RX bar creator? Well, it's because we got to buy talent because the consumer's moving so fast, they can't innovate quick enough. So the M&A world and the private equity world are constantly buying these food companies at ridiculous valuations.
Yeah. Okay, so let's. Anything else on that short list of things that leaders need to know about this space?
Well, if you want to go to grocery, I would say again, it's flexibility. The last mile is the holy grail in terms of food because it's a reoccurring revenue stream, right? Mm-hmm. We eat every week, we eat every day. Or at least I do. And
I haven't yet today, but I intend to, Chris.
So the leaders of grocery businesses, it's kind of a race to the bottom, and it's sad in some way in that if I want, Scott's business, I want him to come online. Well, I actually make more money off Scott if he or his spouse or his children actually come in here and shop. And now I got him as the last mile, and I'm actually losing money on that tote. Mm-hmm. And so, Amazon is forcing all of this, and there's going to be no clear winner. I mean, you've got the Instacart, which is creating HR issues in the aisles. You've got the click and collect, which I've heard is fairly popular, and then you got the true last mile. And so it's that's a skinny margin business.
I think what's interesting about it is, if you've ever heard of Jewel. Jewel was popular in the 50s and 60s and 70s in Chicago, and guess what they did? Grocery delivery.
Yeah.
Has any one of you heard of Jewel? No, of course not.
Well, I call it the return of the milkman. I mean, when I was a child living in Atlanta, we got Mayfield milk and we got Charles chips.
Mm-hmm. Man.
So we got fresh chips delivered and fresh milk. Now, the world's changing now, but it is, you're seeing, it's a $1 trillion industry, the grocery industry. So there's a lot of runway to figure this out, but there are going to be plenty of mistakes along the way. We're seeing them today.
Yeah, I think the technology enables it in greater measure than it ever has in the past. I mean, look, the labor and fuel costs alone negate the profit, right? But if we can leverage drones or whatever alternate delivery devices there might be, then maybe there's a way to make it economical. But you're right, it's going to be a long haul trying to figure out a way to make it a profitable enterprise.
Right.
So Ward, I want to bring you in after Chris kind of laid out some of his observations of what's taking place. What sticks out for you?
Well, like for grocery delivery, I like to use Shipt. So are you familiar with that one?
Out of Birmingham.
Yeah.
Acquired by Target.
So it's a great app that I enjoy using. So I think right now the shoppers, when we order groceries from the Shipt app, go to the store. And I wonder when is that shifting, or if it already is shifting with other companies where they're going to a distribution center instead of going to a store and having shoppers go there. And it seems like it would be way more efficient to create for these grocers to create, or Shipt itself to create but probably the grocers distribution centers for shoppers to go to that are specifically doing last mile deliveries. And what do you know about that?
Well, I can give you a live example, and this is not proprietary information because it's on their quarterly filings. But if you look at Kroger is all. If there's ever going to be a business case study in 10 years, it's going to be what Kroger's doing over the next 3 years. They're pushing all their chips to online, right? They acquired the rights or
smart
technology rights of Ocado, or invested in Ocado, which is a British-based, fully online grocery company, automated. and they're building a Ocado facility in Ohio, Atlanta, and Florida. And to your point, each one of those Ocado facilities will have 10 micro-fulfillment centers in a circle, 250 or 300-mile radius. So basically, the order comes in, it's automatically filled, it gets put on a 53-footer, that goes to that micro-fulfillment center by zip code, it gets broken down onto vans, and then comes into the city. So I don't know. It is a massive bet. Wall Street has not rewarded Kroger for doing it just because, unfortunately, the Amazons of the world have AWS and they're used to them seeing lose money, but Kroger can't bump up its stock because they're spending billions of dollars in technology.
Can I say something about Wall Street?
Please.
I don't think they understand supply chain and logistics.
Of course not.
I follow stocks in this world, and it's a great way to keep up with what's going on in businesses, and sometimes it blows my mind when I read the actual report of what's going on and then see Wall Street's reaction to it because it didn't hit some estimate made by people that don't even know how to make estimates about a certain business, and you're missing it, and then you see stocks crashing down or being fearful because a company like Kroger is investing heavily into this space, and they're being forward thinkers, and they're just looking at, their EBITDA, and sorry, Wall Street, you don't have a clue about supply chain logistics, and I hope we get some people in there that don't make these stocks. They're already pretty thinly traded stocks in the logistics industry, so they're so volatile.
Yes.
And I don't think it's that volatile of an industry. It just looks that way from a stock market perspective because it's so new. People don't know it yet.
The metrics that they've used for decades in the stock market are counterintuitive to what you want to have happen with supply chain. When inventories are rising, that's a good thing.
That's right.
They're seeing that as a precursor or predictor of demand, and that is possibly true in manufacturing, but in every tier below manufacturing, that's not a predictive indicator of what's happening in the marketplace.
Well, the thing is, though, at least there's interest, and that's saying something. As we see interest and we see investments, more awareness and more education and a better understanding what will have to follow, right? Because they're going to get more informed about the investments and the opportunities. So,
do you agree? You guys agree with me, though?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a substantial advocacy effort to get these financial managers to understand the real key performance indicators of supply chain. They don't understand it today, and they're using easily disrupted old metrics to manage success in supply chain, and they need to move to a more indicative, predictive metric to identify what's going on, for sure.
But we're seeing, and we were talking about this as in the warm-up here earlier, we're seeing more and more organizations that have outsourced certain things or have been on the sidelines and haven't been involved in the end-to-end supply chain. We're seeing them hire supply chain talent, supply chain professionals, and that knowledge and that better understanding of what has to happen to make food or cold chain and get it where it needs to go safely and transparently and traceably, if that's a word. There's a much greater awareness. We're seeing it in educational, and we talk a lot about how there's now over 500 programs dedicated to supply chain management coast to coast. I hope that I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's being said. I think there's more awareness today and more interest today in the field, and eventually the people that move into the C-suites, they'll come from this era, this enlightened era, and there'll be a stronger understanding of it.
I don't disagree with that, but we can't apologize for what the street is talking about, right. and we can't fail to force the change to happen, because in the absence of any sort of disruption, the status quo will rule. So I think the statement you're making needs to be made and made repeatedly, and an active, not passive education process for investors needs to occur.
That's right.
Good point. Yeah, I'll agree. So let's switch gears. I appreciate you sharing a lot of this talk. We could set up a show dedicated to each of the updates from each of those sectors. But let's kind of wrap up today's episode. We want to focus on the really important topic of specialization. And Ward, is something we have talked about earlier. And we're not just talking about it from a real estate standpoint, although it's important there. But Ward, you were saying earlier in the warm-up how important specialization and using specialized suppliers in a broader sense. is critical to being successful, right?
That's right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Ward.
Greg.
We'll go back to the street.
I just have to give you this recognition. Look, I've been in supply chain my entire career. And when somebody said, there is a supply chain real estate expert, I said, I never even thought of that as a possibility. I mean, that's the power of what you do. So, and I think it is interesting. It's one of those, wow, I didn't even know there was a business for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to have that recognition.
Well, you know what we get?
I appreciate it.
So we were on a call just several weeks ago, and when we told the person on the call our subject matter for our podcast, what was the response? It was basically like, and you get people to listen.
Yeah. Right? I think they said something like, how many people listen to that?
But this is, so to tie this together, there is such a, call it a niche, there's so much interest in folks that understand supply chain, whether it's from real estate expertise standpoint or whether it's from a content and best practices and some of what, for example, what Chris was just sharing. What's taking place? Folks, there's such a global demand for what's going on in end-to-end supply chain that is still, I think the audience, again, going back, the audience is still growing and we're seeing more interest. But man, if you're a practitioner, you're really looking to see what's going on. And that's why doing these types of conversations and shows are so important. So Ward, let's talk about especially with all
right. That's enough of us talking about you. Let's let you talk about it.
Thanks so much. And specialization is just something that our team, we pride ourselves on. I know Chris and his team, same thing. And so I think initially before we got Chris to come on today, we were just going to be talking in general about specialization. And in real estate, I started working 2 zip codes in Dallas, so specializing in a submarket. And that is a great way to get started in real estate, but you're specializing. And then I shifted that focus to the vertical of really transportation and logistics a couple years into the business. And then I started focusing on that. So I wrote a blog called Submarket Specialization that's really from a real estate angle. But like we're discussing, no matter what business you're in, whether you're a doctor or I said hair salon, or you're a podcast or a realtor, you better be specializing, whether it's in luxurious houses in a certain neighborhood in your city, if you're a residential realtor, or if you're a podcaster like you fellas, and really all of us here at the table right now, we're focused on supply chain, right? Unless you're Joe Rogan, and then you can just talk about anything. And
right.
I will listen every
no matter
time.
what.
I don't care what he's talking about because he's Joe Rogan.
Well, I think Chris said it in kind of pre-show. There is I don't know what you said exactly, but essentially there is a bigger market in a niche. Right?
Yeah. Having a niche actually opens up things.
There you go.
Go dig into that more because I've talked to you about this before.
Yeah, you see the world more clearly, right? In your niche, right? Therefore, you're able to connect the dots quicker. So technically, I feel like there's a lot more business to be had. I mean, Ward and I have talked about this. I mean, when we're talking to our clients, I mean, or when we go to a pitch, it's rarely truthfully about real estate. It's about their problems within their food supply chain.
Trucking or 3PL in my case when I'm meeting with these companies, and we're talking about the problems that they all have. Sure, companies may have a little something different, but if you're specialized in a vertical, they're going to be the same. And if you get on the geography side of things, then people are going to be facing the same problems within that geography. They're going to be understanding the rent situation is how it's changing. It's going to be impacting them all in a similar way. And so no matter what you're specializing in, it just simplifies your life, really.
It does. It's the hedgehog concept. So in that thing you can be best at.
In my blog, I have a 5-step process. I like my lists. And so if you want, I can walk you through this.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, just so our listeners, the blog you're referring to is at supplychainrealestate.com, where you walk through specialization. So I want to make sure folks can, and we'll include a link to that in the show notes. So go right ahead.
Great. And it's a simple 5-step process. This blog is written specifically about specializing in an industrial submarket, but you can apply this to specializing in anything in any industry type. And It's pretty dumbed down, but I think that's what's great about it, because it is so simple, but it is not easy, right?
Yeah.
And step number 1, find a mentor. So I don't think anyone's great. You can't just, I think it's always important to have some type of a mentor that can help coach you along if you're getting involved in a new industry. And this is just ground up. So Chris, did you have a mentor?
I did. The CEO of Trident Seafoods. He's unfortunately since passed away, but that's what got me into the business, was that he took me under his wing as a result of a cold call, because I heard they were looking for an East Coast manufacturing facility. Took about a year, and then we became very good friends.
And you were just chasing that one deal.
And that opened up the world of to me to specialize.
That's awesome.
And same thing for me in logistics. I've got one deal with Dynamics at the time. They were the largest same-day delivery company in North America, and that door of opportunity opened, which we've discussed on past episodes. And then I'm working on 30 simultaneous transactions in the last mile sector, and then leadership moved to the LTL sector, and then I started attending Georgia Tech, taking their supply chain classes, and just you get into that. So I started as a sub-market specialist, then morphed into a vertical specialist in the logistics and transportation sector. The same way, having a mentor there. And then I had a mentor when I got started as a sub-market specialist too, and he was a sub-market specialist in these 2 zip codes that I started out in. So then your next step 2 is identify your sub-market or your target market, or whatever you want to call it, whatever you're going to specialize in. You want to be as specific as possible. So in my case today, I specialize really in logistics and transportation solutions. So I've got a list of every third-party logistics company and LTL trucking company that exist. And so then step 2 is you identify who's going to be your target market. So you've described yours a little bit, but what's your target market, Chris, compared to mine? What does that look like?
In terms of what size are they?
Just companies. Who does it take to make on your list?
We're kind of that 100 million to 2 billion, kind of that small to mid cap. We don't want to butt our heads up against the big boys, just because we feel like we can be nimble and quicker with those. Those are the individuals we found we can add the most of value, and subsequently had the most successful relationships.
Yeah. And then after that, you move to step 3, which is you database all of this. So you want to, Grant Cardone, who as my executive coach, you go
to Grant Cardone?
I do. We meet once a month. So we have a once a month coaching session.
He's in Dallas too, right?
He's in Miami.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to get him on our podcast, so I've got my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a lot of fun. So stay tuned, and hopefully we can make some magic happen. But he's just a part of business in general. You're going to have a little bit of business anxiety at times. And when you're meeting with your coach, you're always trying to dig in and think how to rid yourself of anxiety related to business. It's the point of a coach. And he's always like, Ward, you got your list? Who's on your list? And you think about it you better know who's on your list. And if you start, and you should clearly know who's on your list, and you want it in a database, and you want to be constantly reaching out to them, staying in front of them, A, to find business opportunities, B, to learn what's going on in the area of your specialization. There's nothing better than surrounding yourselves with leadership, people in leadership roles within your target market to take your expertise exponentially and continually to the next level. So that brings me to step 4, which is contact your target audience. And
that's really good.
If you define it, and
the younger people have a hard time with that.
Yep.
They just
I'm
expect
done.
the phone to ring.
They do. And then you identify your target market, you make a list, and then you go contact them. How is this done?
Yeah.
Phone calls, emails, LinkedIn, all avenues
Instagram.
of social media.
Right.
I like to go to conferences. That's my secret weapon for contacting my target audience.
No longer a secret. Way to go.
Hey, I always say
defy anyone to beat you.
I'd love to give everyone my login to my database and say go for it, because 90% of people won't do anything with it.
Yeah,
it's so the true. Beauty of the hard work that's required to make
Deals
this
don't come find you.
Very simple system work. You have to go work your butt off.
Yeah.
So yeah, but just surrounding yourself, and if you're locally specialized, I know of you think all realtors or commercial real estate brokers are golfers, and I'm not. Are you?
No, I mean, I play.
Yeah, you play. I don't play at all. I gave my clubs to Cole on my team. I quit. I tried to play because I thought it was would make me a better commercial real estate broker, but no.
It seems like less and less executives these days are playing golf.
It's true.
Right. Maybe in our sector, in supply chain. I don't know, but I know people do that a lot of times because you're surrounding yourself with, if you're in Dallas and you're a member of an exclusive country club, typically other high-level people, influencers within Dallas are going to be there. So it's good to go into an area like that and surround yourself with these high-level decision makers, because then you get to know them and you know what problems they're facing, their pain points, and you build a personal relationship. So for me, my country club, like it or not, is going to 3PL conferences, and they're fun. And you, especially at first, it's weird. And they're like, who is this guy? You're not even part of our club. You're a real estate broker. You're a vendor. Yeah. But you keep going. And I've gone to IWLA and taken classes like the essentials of warehousing, gone to Georgia Tech. And at a point in time, if you dedicate yourself to it and you enjoy it, you're going to just be there to talk about supply chain. And I know Chris is like this too. If a deal happens, but we're passionate about what we do for a living, and we can, in the sectors that we specialize in. So I can just sit there and talk about that and just be perfectly content. And if a deal comes along, fantastic.
You just can't wait to talk to Dave or whoever about that thing you discovered in the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Organic conversations.
Or Greg and Scott
right.
on a microphone.
That's right. And then so to wrap up, your step 5 is basically to repeat step 4, right?
Boom.
Action.
Action. Keep contacting them. Evolve your list. Grant Cardone tells me that too. He's constantly like, if they don't make sense anymore, remove them. If there's someone new that needs to be on there, add them. Constant and never-ending improvement. But you got to know what your list is, and you got to get in front of everybody that's on your list. And then, you know what? A lot of that business anxiety will go away. And if you wake up in the morning and feel lost and confused, just make sure you have a list and go call the people on the list, and that'll go away.
I just thought about this. I've never even said this out loud, but my guide for fishing, I go fly fishing a lot. And he's always like, you can't catch a fish with your fly in the air. Yeah. Because people just keep on. It's like, you got to put your fly in the water in order to have a shot.
Yeah, it's a good point.
That's right.
So you got to make the effort.
Well, all right. So you mentioned some industry events. IWLA, great organization. They've got a big event coming up in the spring out in California, I believe.
San Diego, that's right. I love it when anyone does an event in San Diego.
No kidding. Great food.
Beyond attending, I know y'all both serve on panels, and Ward, you and I have talked about some of your previous keynotes. What events are on your calendar, let's say through the end of the year or first part of 2020? Anything that come to mind?
I'm doing I'm doing an event I'm looking forward to in a couple weeks in Los Angeles, and it's called Summit LA. And Summit it's my first time to attend this, and you should Google it to really understand, but it's kind of 1/3 business entrepreneurship and 1/3 wellness. And so that's everything from yoga and things like that I'm really into, to meditation and nutrition and different speakers, and then 1/3 music. So it's a weekend event. I view it as a little bit personal, a little bit business. I believe Jeff Bezos spoke at it last year. This year, the CEO of Uber will be there. Lots of CEOs from these major companies that are shifting our world attend it. So from that standpoint, I'm really excited. And then I love music, and I love finding new ways to go work out. And so I'm excited about that. That's in 2 weeks in LA. And then I love to attend the BGSA supply chain every year in January. And Ben Gordon puts that on. He is investor and investment banker, supply chain guru, overall supply chain guru. And I'm also working to get Ben here to be on our podcast so you can meet him.
Outstanding.
And Ben puts on this great conference in West Palm Beach that happens to be at the Breakers Hotel in January. So all three of those things come together pretty nicely and make it one of my favorite events of the year.
And a great time of year to be in a great place.
Yeah, and you get the conference discount on the room.
Yeah.
Although you got to pay for the conference, so it cancels out.
We will add both home URLs for those conferences on the show notes as well, so folks can check those out. Tis the season, the event heavy, and we've got a calendar that's filling up, continues to fill up. We just got back from Charleston and New Orleans, although that had
nothing to do with work.
All to do with good food and family, though. So let's make sure folks can
Hold on, I wanted to know from Chris if there's food conferences that.
Oh my!
They're not quite as exciting as some of those conferences. You should.
Good eating.
I just make them sound exciting.
Yeah, Turner Weishart and Sam Campbell, two of my partners on my team, are actually down right now at the IFDA, which is the Food Service Distribution Association. They're down there.
Orlando.
Yep, they're in Orlando right now. Started yesterday, and then I'm going to an exciting one in November, probably PLMA, which is Private Label Manufacturers Association. But again, we're the only brokers there, and it's just as much for education for me to take back to the team than it is to be meeting people. I mean, the content of these are just as good for me to be calling on. So
that's an important trend to be at the front of, though.
Yep.
A lot of companies are going private label because the margins are so much better.
They are. So it's again. That one's up in Chicago, but those will be the two before the end of the year.
Cool.
But I'd like to go down to the Breakers and just.
You should.
Yeah.
You should.
Can you score him a cheap room?
Yeah.
I'll
sleep on a cot.
that hotel, they call it the Breakers because it breaks you.
It breaks you. Yeah. That's exactly right.
All right. Well, let's make sure our listeners know how to get in touch with both of y'all in case you want to follow up, compare notes, you name it. So, Chris, let's start with you.
We've got ColliersFoodAdvisoryServices.com. You can find our stuff on there or on LinkedIn. Just about any. I think we have a Twitter feed. I'm not good with this, but I think I gave you the information.
Yep.
Social media is not my forte, so this is clearly. I'm on the spectrum here.
You're a natural here at podcasting, so I don't know. You might want to tap into it a little more.
But anyway, they can find us just about on LinkedIn or ColliersFoodAdvisoryServices.com.
Perfect, and we'll add those links as well. Ward, what about yourself?
Best way to find me is our website, supplychainrealestate.com, and I'm constantly posting on there, and then my cell phone number's on there, and I always just say text me and let's start up conversation. And I just wanted to add in, I mean, Chris is here because we've worked together. I've been at Colliers for about 8 years, and if there's anything food related, I'm calling Chris, and
that is a very specialized marketplace.
Yeah,
right.
We get requests. I run into people out there at these conferences, and knowing a lot of 3PLs that transfer. I like to go meet with shippers too, as you know, and we'll go to these conferences where there are a lot of shippers there. And if someone needs something cold storage, and they'll ask, "Hey, we might need a cold storage. This just happened with a real live company. Ward, can you find us?" all existing cold storage buildings in the Western United States. And then I say, yep. And I email Chris and say, will you please send me a survey of this? And then he goes, yep. And literally an hour from my conversation, Chris tracks every cold storage building in the United States. So I already know he knows the answer to that.
It's on his list.
So I'm not going to go try to pretend I'm an expert. I'm going to call Chris. And so due to, us both being passionate for specializing in things in our industry, and we've become good friends. And so Annie lives in Atlanta, so we had breakfast before the last one. I'm like, dude, you got to be on this podcast. And so I hope you get to come back and tell us more about.
Well, we've added him to the craft brew crew already, so he's in.
That's good. That's the last mile is the beer into your belly.
Right. That's right.
Fascinating conversation. I really appreciate the kindred spirits. Clearly, there's a rapport between the two of y'all, and I can see as opportunities. I love how specialists have their own specialists. Basically what
a specialist.
That's important.
Yeah.
That's important. Well, big thanks once again, Ward Richmond, Executive VP and shareholder at Colliers International, his colleague, Chris Cummings, National Director, Food Advisory Services at Colliers. Ward's based in Dallas, but he's coast to coast. Chris based here in Atlanta, but also coast to coast, or our continent, the whole continent, right?
Yeah.
Of North America, helping businesses solve challenges and more importantly, grow profitably. Great to have you both on. Looking forward to our next installment of the Supply Chain Real Estate series here on Supply Chain Radio. Thanks, Ward and Chris.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Greg.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we're just going to wrap up really quickly here at the end of the episode. I want to share a couple of events we're going to be at, starting with Austin next week.
EFT CIO Logistics Summit.
It sneaked up quick.
Cool.
Yeah.
The November 7th and 8th, they're in Austin. It's put on by EFT, which is now a Reuters organization.
Right, Reuters
Great
events.
for them.
Yeah.
That's right. Nick and Asif, they continue to grow. Looking forward to a great event in Austin.
And we got a number of interviews already set up, right? And a couple more that it's going to be some exciting stuff. These CIOs
Agreed.
are going to get together and share a bunch of ideas with one another.
Well,
it's always fascinating to watch that happen.
It is, and as we alluded to earlier, there is exciting things going on in the logistics space, both what's already here, what's coming in, the investments coming in, but more importantly, is supply chain is technology these days. Logistics is technology, right? So I'm looking forward to being around a lot of people a lot smarter than me and kind of seeing what some of these leading companies are doing, right? From a leadership standpoint, from a technology standpoint, from a challenges, solutions standpoint. So we look forward to those conversations. In fact, that's where we met Ward.
That's right.
He served on a panel or sponsored the EFT event here in June here in Atlanta.
3PL event.
That's right. Okay, and then we're going to get through the holidays, CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable here in January. We're going to be covering one of their lunch events where NASDAQ executive, one of their leadership team members are going to come out and talk about how transportation regulations are impacting a variety of businesses. The Reverse Logistics Association Conference and Expo out in Las Vegas in February. Looking forward to our friend Tony Schroeder. If you're interested in, y'all, as y'all both know, reverse logistics, returns.
That sounds cool.
It is
You'll have to
huge.
send me info on that.
I sure will. So if any of our listeners are looking for best practices in that space, which a lot of companies are, that's what's fueling the global growth of this organization, rla.org. Tony Schroeder is doing some great things with a heavy-hitting board. I mean, they've
got to love what his perspective is. It's not just to deal with returns. He even has the perspective of trying to limit or eliminate returns, and that comes from a lot of history in the industry. So he's a great leader for that.
Absolutely, rla.org. And then one final note in terms of upcoming events, Modex. Modex is going to be here in March. Modex 2020, we're going to be broadcasting throughout all 4 days, and they are hosting our 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, which we nailed down a great keynote, a great MC. Registration, nominations, and sponsorships are all open today.
We had our first executive committee meeting.
That's right, yesterday.
Yeah.
We sure did.
So we're getting kicked off.
All 47 members of our executive committee. No, I'm kidding. A very passionate and engaged
very good group.
Committee. Folks that are used to, serving and leading in the business community here in Metro Atlanta. Christian Fisher, President CEO of Georgia Pacific, is our keynote for that event.
Shane Cooper.
That's right. Shane Cooper is going to be our MC.
Right.
Shane was a former lots of things, but Chief Transformation Officer at WestRock.
Yeah.
And senior executive leader at Lockheed's manufacturing facility here in Atlanta. So she's got more manufacturing and supply chain chops than I'll ever have.
Cred, yeah.
So
that's cool.
And a great speaker, too.
WestRock's a Colliers client.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
They're a great company.
They're right up the street.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's also really neat is Modex is free to attend. 35,000 people is what they're expecting at Modex. 35. How do you
Have you ever been to
plan?
this thing before?
I'm too much of an introvert to go somewhere with 35,000 people.
Well, for
they build
Just
little.
got anxious.
I'll tell you, you can learn a lot about supply chain at this. They build miniature factories and miniature warehouses with conveyors systems.
Really?
And everything. It is.
That is
like,
cool. And I'm
something you wanna
joking.
bring your
We've
kids
talked
to.
about this.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I'd love to check it out.
Yeah.
Modex
Very cool.
show, MODEX show.com, free to attend. Join up, and also the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. You can find more information there at the aptly named Atlanta Supply Chain Awards.com.
How did we think of that?
I don't know.
That's cool you're doing that. Maybe we can open up the Dallas Supply Chain Awards
Sure.
and expand it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we'll call it the Cotton Bowl supply.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Well, we're going to definitely talk
Yeah.
once we stop this episode. Big thanks to our guest today. Had a great conversation. I always learn a lot when we sit down. I am everything but a real estate expert. So to sit down with two mavens is very educational on our end. So big thanks to Ward Richmond and Chris Cummings, both with Colliers International, on this episode of the Supply Chain Real Estate podcast series on Supply Chain Now Radio. To our audience, and big thanks to you, Greg. Really enjoyed it
My
here
pleasure.
today.
Yeah.
We've got a big schedule this week, as a matter of fact, right?
Yeah. So, we're going to be back in studio tomorrow and Thursday.
That's right.
Right? So,
We've got Barrison tomorrow talking all about AI. We've got the Vetlanta
Somebody
Voice.
who's going to talk reasonably about AI. I can't wait for Paul Noble to come in and do that.
Vetlanta Voice tomorrow, and then we're interviewing the senior leaders of MHI, speaking of it, Modex, up in Charlotte later this week. So lots to come. To our audience, be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, YouTube. Greg, don't break my legs if I don't get that out there. All the other leading sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now Radio team and Ward Richmond and the Supply Chain Real Estate podcast series, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.